Welcome to Huddle Up with Matias Bueno. Today's guest is host and producer at the Toronto Raptors, Savanna Hamilton. Savanna, thanks for being on today's episode. I'm super excited to talk ball and to delve into the life of a Toronto woman's, I guess you could say.
So I was used to listening to Toronto Man's, that Toronto Woman's. That's a new one.
So first things first, we got to get going on what's going on with the Raptors here. They've dropped 7 straight, and the trade deadline's coming up in just under a week here. Do the Raptors make a move at the deadline? What do you think are some of the things that would be important for them to make, or moves that are important for them to make, if they're going to put themselves in a position to succeed more so in the long term?
Well, I can't comment on the moves that they should make. However, I do think that they're in a rough patch right now, and that's okay. They had, they dropped some games. Their team was following health and safety league protocols of the league. That being said, you're bound to drop games when you don't have full strength. So, I wouldn't say make any knee-jerk reaction moves. And I think Masai Ujiri he's obviously a very smart leader for his decisions. And so I don't know if there's going to be any major moves. I'm personally a believer in just kind of staying pat and like weathering out the storm. We have seen Norm Powell go off in this past stretch, right? Since February, he's been averaging over 20 points a game. So, he's been such a great factor to have on our team. That alongside when just before Pascal, had to follow league safety protocols, he was also playing really good basketball. Same with OG. They're all finding their rhythm. Don't forget, this is the team that beat the Bucks. So when they are full strength, and Kyle Lowry, not to mention him, he's been breaking records this entire season, like most charges, most assists, second to DeMar now in points. So this is a great team. They had a rough start in the beginning of the season. They stayed pat. Now they're good again. And then now we're having another rough patch. You can't help the fact that, Fred came out and said, hey guys, I actually had COVID. That's, of course, you're going to not come out the strongest because 1, rust, 2, maybe he's still regaining his energy. Obviously no symptoms, no nothing. He's clear to play, but you know how you feel personally when you have a flu and then you're better from the flu, but you're still kind of just a little out of it, got to get your rhythm back. So I don't know if there's going to be any major moves. I can't comment on that again, but I do know that this team, when healthy, is very, very strong.
It's been very strange the way that the course of the season has gone with the week 2-8 starts, and then they surged, and you mentioned they beat the Bucks and went on a tear, winning a bunch of games in a row. And even though the playoffs don't seem that far-fetched, they kind of have to pick up the slack a little bit if they're going to be able to make a push. Now, I know with the adjustments of the 7-10 get the play in, it's very strange to ponder. Will the Raptors make the playoffs? That's one thing that I've been debating with friends and with my brothers, but I don't know if at this point in time, there's enough left in the tank for them to make a push to qualify for the postseason. Even though it looks really within reach, I'm not 100% sure. What are your thoughts on their abilities to make it to the the postseason this year?
Are you a pessimist?
I mean, I have always believed the Raptors can do well, but I just feel shaky when they go on these kind of streaks where they lose a bunch in a row. It is possible. I wouldn't be surprised if they did make it, but it's really tough to believe that they will with how inconsistent the team has been. That's all I can say about what's happened this season.
I hear you. But I mean, like I said, their past rough stretch has been very rocky, and that does mean that they have to make up ground now for that. So this upcoming month, they really got to push and win games. That is something that's hard to do when you're at this point in the season, and other teams have been able to find their rhythm and get this all sorted out now for a few months, right? However, I will say that the East is a very, very tight conference this year. I got to check the standings exactly again, but I know back at early March, the difference between the 4th position and the 11th position was 3 games. So, with that in mind, it's It's very doable. It's very approachable. It's very winnable. That just being said, they got to string some wins along to execute that way. So I'm looking forward to seeing what happens this upcoming month. Their road schedule ahead, I don't think it's as hard. I think the worst is actually behind us. As they the Jazz was like the number one team in the league. The Bucks, we won against the Bucks earlier this season, as I said. And that's also a top team in this league. There's other teams that aren't doing so well this season. It's very interesting to see. And like, I know as an observer myself, I'm like, yeah, this is a pandemic season. And it's one thing to be in a bubble, but it's another thing to be traveling on the road, a bit more exposure. And like other teams have faced it as well, right? It's not just the Raptors. I find that I thought that like other teams kind of had their run with league health and safety protocols earlier in the season. So they were able to like make up ground throughout. Now we're having it a little later in the season. So it's going to be a pinch to make up that ground. However, don't forget Fred VanVleet just dropped 54 points, breaking an NBA record for most points dropped by an undrafted player, beating Moses Malone. So that's nothing to snip at. These players are very capable of going off at any time. I think like I said, Norm has proven to be a weapon now. So that being said, we got Pascal, Fred, Kyle, Norm, OG, even when he wants to go off in certain games, these guys are all five guys, complete versatile weapons. So it's going to be interesting what happens in the upcoming months. I think they're just going to find their rhythm again. Henry Ellenson, I've liked what I've seen from him on the court, considering he's just a recent call up. So we'll see. We'll see. I think they can do it. I'm an optimist. I think they can squeeze into 8. I think they can do it.
I just hope that the pattern continues of how things have changed since Lowry's been on the team as a leader and since 14-15 making the playoffs, because growing up a Raptors fan within our age demographic, there were unfortunately more reasons to be pessimistic than optimistic, but I know that the Raptors can do it. It's just a matter of finding consistency. If they can do it, if they can find the rhythm and make up for that lost ground, like you said, after their shockingly poor start, then I think that they can make it. But at this point in time, until they start winning games again, it just is a really tough outlook, because you look at the Knicks with what they've done. And you mentioned how weird the East has been in terms of it being tight and teams doing better than expected and worse than expected. They're in okay position right now. They're only, I think, sitting 2.5 games out of the playoffs, or I guess out of 8th. But if they get the 7-10 grace, then they have a little bit more of a second life. But I just want to see the Raptors winning more games before I can, start running to the bookies to put my money on the Raptors making the playoffs. Now, them in the playoffs is a totally different conversation. But as far as making it goes, I think that this season isn't what we expected. But at the same time, I would much rather have this be oh no, this is a disaster, than 22-60 or the 24-48 years that they had when Dwayne Casey was first at the helm. That is the thing that I'm very thankful for and will never take for granted, knowing as a Raptors fan where this team has come from.
Yeah, absolutely. I think all Raptors fans can relate to the years where, playoffs, what are those? We've been spoiled as Raptors fans. How many years have we made the playoffs now? I've literally lost track.
I think 7. Okay. I think that 13, 14, 14, 15, 15, 16, 16, 17, 17, 18, 18, 19, 19, 20. So that's, 7 in a row. 7.
There you go. Yeah. So we got 7 years of making playoffs. So we haven't seen a tough season in a long time. And I know that even people our age, it's one thing to grow up and follow the Raptors, but it's another thing to be very deeply emotionally invested as you really start to understand the game. So I think even you and I, we're used to seeing them in the playoffs. We're used to seeing them win. And so this is an unfamiliar territory, at least for me personally, because I'm I do remember when they were not as strong as they are now, but I'm also used to seeing them win. So I do have the confidence that they can squeak into the playoffs, but we'll see what happens, man. We'll see what happens. It's not as bad as you think. We're not back in the Rudy Gay years.
No, you want to talk about embarrassing Raptors stories, the worst performance I ever saw as a Raptors fan ever. I was there live to watch in Minneapolis in 2010, 2011. It was the first year Chris Bosh was not on the team. And I watched the Raptors lose to the eventual 17-65 Timberwolves. And this team, their best player was, they had Wayne Ellington, Ricky Rubio wasn't playing. Like, it was just, this team was so brutal, and they lost by like 17 or something. And it was, I think, the second time in franchise history that the Raptors had lost in Minnesota. It was really sad. And the Raptors, Jared Bayless, he missed a dunk. He was going for a layup and then tried to dunk halfway. Trey Johnson got minutes. It was not fun. That's what I'll say. But we're gone to those days. There's no Chris Humphries, Anthony Parker, being the bailouts, but brighter days are ahead of us for the Raptors. And I want to transition to, speaking of, talking about Toronto Raptors, let's get into this. Is Kyle Lowry the greatest Raptor there ever was? And if so, if he is, then should his number be retired when he finishes his playing career? And if not, then who's the greatest Raptor ever?
I mean, I feel like that's such an obvious question. Like, that's such an obvious answer. And sorry, going back a little bit to, we put down the dark days of the Raptors. However, we got to keep in mind that these are also the Trailblazers, and that we're one of the newer franchises in the league still. And so, yeah, there's going to be some rough days in the past, but, it also sets you up to where we are today. It propels you. We learn from mistakes. We, figure it out. And that's what happened back then. But yeah, going to your question, absolutely. Who else would be the greatest Raptor of all time? I'm sorry. Do you have another name in mind? Like,
well,
you can't.
Don't
even say Kawhi. Don't even say Kawhi.
No. Don't worry. Kawhi he has capped potential on how high he can go on this list because of only being there for 1 year.
1 year, exactly.
But, if the listener, if they're a CFL fan, it would be the comparison to the Zach Collaros of the Bombers. 1 year, 4 games, won the Grey Cup for the first time in 30 years. Can't be one of the best QBs ever, but has to get a lot of, recognition for doing something in such a short amount of time. Now, I believe that Kyle Lowry is number one, but there would be fans out there who would be able to make an argument for Vince Carter because Vince Carter had to walk so Kyle Lowry could run. And because of Vince Carter putting Toronto on the map as a basketball destination in the league and in Canada, if you look at how the Vancouver Grizzlies struggled and how the absence of a marquee player didn't allow them to gain enough popularity, now obviously minus their poor financial management, to continue as a franchise, Vince Carter provided that spark for Toronto. And that, I don't think, can ever be forgotten in the midst of whatever happens for the rest of history. But I would still put Lowry because of everything that he's done to eclipse Vince since. But that's, I think, where the main debate lies. And I don't know what your argument points would be against Vince or for him, or where there is recognition that should be given, or how Lowry has really cemented himself as number one.
Well, I mean, on top of like what we've said before of, Lowry, he's been breaking records. He's been a leader on this team. He's been a vocal leader. And like, yeah, absolutely. Vince Carter, absolute trailblazer, 100%. He's put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this team. We also have to acknowledge Jamal McGlory. You have to acknowledge Tracy McGrady. You have to acknowledge all the past coaches, everybody, right? But like, in terms of players, like there hasn't been, I feel like, such a leader like Kyle Lowry, who's put this team on his back. He's transformed his own game. We saw him come from Houston, I believe, before he came to the Raptors, Memphis before that. And he was a player that I feel like people slept on him, and he came to the Raptors and he kind of changed the culture. It wasn't immediate. It was definitely a growing pattern with him and DeMar, but we've seen how far he's come in his journey. And I ask myself, like, how much growth? Like, Vince Carter, obviously an incredible player, but with the Raptors in particular, how much growth did we see? Obviously phenomenal, half man, half amazing. Okay. Not gonna ever take that away from him. He had a phenomenal career for the rest of his NBA like span. And he only just retired, like last year, or a year before, or something like that. Like, so, I feel like Kyle Lowry, he just put a lot of time into this team and brought it. And honestly, like, can you ever argue against Kyle Lowry because he won a championship. That's the difference. That's honestly that he brought a championship to Toronto. Love Vince Carter, obviously, but there's no championship to that name. And for that reason also, absolutely Kyle Lowry's jersey has to be retired.
Yeah, I always felt confused on the whole, the beef between Vince and Toronto and with the way that things went down and people like, oh no, his number shouldn't be retired and all these sorts of things. And then he comes back and then the emotional welcome years and years later. Now, there's no question that Lowry should be retired, but I'm still a bit shaky on why people don't think Vince's should be retired. Now, I know obviously no championship, et cetera, but if you look at those in those early years with the Raptors, they struggled in their first season, and then Vince helped put them on the map, and they were there for a stretch of 5 seasons. And then once things start to die down, that's when the Raptors struggled. And then there was the Chris Bosh era, and then he only took them to the playoffs. I think it was 2 or 3 times. I think it was 06, 07, 07, 08, and then 08, 09. And again, he broke the record, and I remember him breaking 10,000 points and all these sorts of things. But I think that in order for the Vince Toronto beef to be officially put to rest, they need to pay his respects and retire his number because, as much as I loved Amir Johnson's hustle, I don't think it would have been appropriate for him to have worn number 15, considering Vince Carter literally had one of the greatest performances in NBA slam dunk contest history and did so many fantastic things with the Raptors, all the buzzer beaters, the dunks, you name it, putting the team on the map. That cannot go unrecognized.
Absolutely. No, Vince Carter, you said it right there. He put the team on the map when everybody was like, still like, who's this purple dinosaur, red dinosaur team, whatever, Barney. He was one who he honestly brought attention to this team. Don't forget that, this team is also the one that beat Michael Jordan as well, like Michael Jordan's team. So anyways, we got to pay respects to the past. And I don't have really a comment on if they should or should not retire his jersey. I personally, I do have a comment. I think they should. I think they should retire his jersey, to be honest, because you're right. When you see other players wear it, it just doesn't hit the same. And no, he doesn't have all the accomplishments that our current Raptors do with the championship title, with all these records. But he was there in the quote unquote dark days. He was there for Toronto, and he did put us on the map. And when you think about Vince Carter, a lot of people think of his time in Toronto. They don't really think about his other teams that he was on as much. So I know the Toronto fans have a hard relationship, but you know what? I actually believe that it's changed. I think people do appreciate him now. So and as they should, honestly. So I think they should retire his jersey. We'll see.
We'll have to wait and see on the verdict from MLSE or I guess the Toronto Raptors as if they will do that. But at the end of the day, at least fans will be able to know that they had the emotional thank you Vince moments that I think we've been waiting for since 2004 when he left Toronto for New Jersey. And that was definitely a tough time for Raptors fans. And that was even well before I started following. So I knew that he was always in the team, but it wasn't until several years removed that he was in the Nets, and then the double overtime and all those, him getting the Raptors back. That was really tough to watch because that was my first exposure to really watching him play consciously. And I mean, Vince, we love you, man. So no hard feelings. And hopefully number 15 is hanging in the rafters someday, sooner rather than later. So now to transition to something still related to the Raptors, but not necessarily to the NBA team. You have done work with the 905 in your career, and I've also done work for the Toronto Raptors in the NBA. Talk a bit about what some of the unhidden gems are that exist within the G League and the 905 as a whole, and the culture that, that has been created in the GTA with having a G League team to our own here in Canada, and what that experience has been like from your end.
Oh my goodness, it's been phenomenal. I had this conversation on my show Raptors Today, and I asked my guests, I was like, if Bruno Caboclo was to walk into the 905 today, what was his, do you think he would have had a better experience, as a player and everything? Because when Bruno Caboclo got signed to the Raptors, keep in mind that there was no 905 at the time. It came the following year, I believe. So, and then, whenever you start up a new program, a new team, doesn't matter what it is, you're going to have some bumps along the way. So I think they they straightened those out very, very fast for a new G League franchise. And we see it last season, not this past one, but the season before, they got G League Franchise of the Year. And we had, with this past season, we saw Chad Sanders, the GM, he got, Executive of the Year. Henry Ellenson was the sixth, he was sixth in the league in scoring, averaging like 21 points a game, I believe. And his like 3-point shot was like at 42% from the three, and he's like a 6'10" center. So, they've development on this team like is incredible, is incredible. And we saw, like I said, mentioned it before, Henry Ellison also got a call up. We saw Gary Payton yesterday. He actually got G League Defensive Player of the Year. So, this team has proven records now, proven success. And that just comes from the past years of really development and everything. And now we see it in the coaches side of things as well. So they're not just using this franchise to develop players, but to develop their own staff too. So, we saw like Brittany Donaldson, she was on the 2019 NBA Raptors championship team. And she's now going to the 905, and that's not because she's not capable of being at the Raptors. Absolutely not. That's not it. They just want to give her more responsibility on the G League side of things. And they did. Like, she was running drills. She was writing up plays for special situations, and like end of game, like late clock, all that. So the players really respected her. Is really a great relationship. And And another thing that this franchise and has really built in culture wise is just like a family. Honestly, like it's so interesting to see, because the Raptors and the 905 relationship between each other is unique in the fact that not all G League teams with their NBA affiliate are so close. Actually, a lot of times you're the G League, we're the NBA, we'll call you up when we need you. But with the way that the Raptors work, it's intertwined. Like, front office of the Raptors talks to front office of the 905. They're like, no, we're like literally the same, but you guys are extension. And we see that because now with the Raptors, we have players like Pascal, like Chris Boucher. These guys are all in the 905 before they came up to the Raptors. Obviously Norm, Fred, and these guys, they're champions, right? So, the 905 is a standout when it comes to like their performance within the G League overall. This past year, don't forget, we also saw something new that the G League did. They had a team called Ignite, where they had a bunch of high school kids and high school players that will be entering the draft later this year, play in this league. So now they're playing professional instead of going the college route, which is an interesting decision that the G League did. So they really use the G League as a platform to try new things. And they also paired the Ignite team, as much as they had young players, they paired them with vets actually too. So it was cool to see, and they did pretty well for themselves. They made the playoffs. 905 actually played them in the first round of playoffs and beat them. So it was good to see, because the 905 actually lost to that team earlier in the season. But the thing is that 905 were number one in the G League, so they only lost 3 games, and one of them was to Ignite. So seeing them beat them in the playoffs was obviously rewarding. But I love following the G League because it's such a great league in terms of like seeing how development comes about, and just the 905 in particular, just seeing the direct results from what we can grow in the 905 to what we see as a result in the Toronto Raptors.
The 905, they've had such a fascinating journey so far. And with everything you've mentioned, you look and see the results speak for themselves, with the culture they've created being intertwined with the front office of the Toronto Raptors. Because before, the Fort Wayne Pistons were the team that the Raptors were affiliated with. And I think that there was 1 or 2 other NBA teams that were affiliated with them. I think Detroit and maybe Indiana, both of them are one of those 2. So I know that it's very difficult when you don't feel that you have an intimate relationship with your affiliate team, because what ends up happening then is it's very distant. And like you said, I love that, we'll call you when we need you, and that's it. And there's not really that back and forth. And I believe the 905, they have already won a G League championship, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And number 2 is like, they've done it in an insanely short amount of time.
Yep.
They, from the ground up, they've already jumped to the top of the G League, and other teams don't necessarily have that same connection, which I think it shows in, the stable success that Toronto has been able to build. Although obviously the 905 representative of Mississauga still very close by. And I know that there's other NBA teams that don't have G League teams that are very close to them, or it is a bit distant. So with what Toronto has done in the 905, I think is excellent. Now, maybe next on the list is a WNBA team, but who may have to wait a few years on that. I do think that Toronto is starting to establish Canada as a reputable basketball country and location. And I think that, but I'm not saying that because they didn't have that reputation before, but I think that now other people are starting to give respect to Canadian basketball. And more on that, you were a CIS USports player during your university career for the Ryerson Rams. Talk about what inspired you to first play basketball, and number two, how you found the culture of CIS and USports basketball as compared to maybe down in the NCAA, or what life is really like as a USports athlete in basketball, especially here in Ontario, because it's a different breed than in some other places in Canada.
You gave me like 5 questions there.
there's so much. It just, you can chop it down one swing at a time there.
Okay. I'm going to try to remember them all. So first one was what inspired me to play basketball. That was my family for sure. Like my dad got me into the game pretty much as soon as I could walk. I literally have baby photos of myself, like sitting in a hoop, like a little kiddie hoop, or my dad lifting me up to like a big rim, or, like all that stuff. And then I come from like a long line of basketball family, like history. I have aunts that played professionally overseas. One of my aunts was one of the first Canadians in the WNBA. She also played on Team Canada. So she was a huge inspiration for my career as well. And then just following everybody's footsteps, they really encouraged me to start young, and I did. And it paid off. I got a lot of offers to go to the States, but I was very focused on my education, and I love sports and I loved media at the time. I fell in love with video editing actually when I was in high school. And I didn't know how to pair the two until I saw a woman named Sage Steele from ESPN, and she really inspired me. So I was like, wow, like I want to be like her. So I decided to like, okay, cool. I'm gonna take sport media pretty seriously now. And so luckily enough, boom, Ryerson had a sport media program, brand new. And I was like, I got to do this. So, and then not to mention at the same time, once I told the coach that was recruiting me that I was actually interested if I was to go to one school in Canada, because my sights were completely set in the States. If I was to go to one school in Canada, it would be Ryerson, I told her. And she's like, and then after that, she just hounded me in recruiting. She was like, okay, well, that being noted. And she actually made like a recruiting video. It was like super awesome. She gave me not one, but like 2 visits to the school. Cause at first I visited the school for journalism, and then I just felt like it wasn't my fit. And then I came back and I was like, actually, can I visit again and like talk to like sport media professors like that will be running the program? She's like, absolutely. And so, yeah, and she was also the coach of the national team. So that was also very tempting. And she did tell me that, like, listen, you come to Ryerson, we'll work together and I'll try to get you a tryout for Team Canada. And I was like, done. So with all that insightful things, I was like, yep, this is a easy sign here. So I signed. And now going to your next question of, what was my experience like playing USports/CIS, which thank you, by the way, for understanding that, we did have a change of name, and I know that you played football. So you probably completely understand the rebrand that happened like halfway through university.
2016, I remember. Yeah. That was the first year. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, I remember when I first heard like USports, I'm like, USports. And then now I'm like, actually, yeah, it sticks. It's cool. It's modern. Yeah, so my experience with USports and playing basketball, well, unfortunately, it wasn't as positive, I would say, as my high school experience. Like high school, I had a great team around me. We went really far. We won like all like our regional, I think we went like, I don't know, at least 6 or 7 years straight with winning regionals. Like every single time I played, like all the years I was playing on the senior team in high school, we always won like regions. So I actually don't know when they ever lost regions. And then we went to OFSA. I played against Kia Nurse many times between high school, between rep basketball, and then we also played AAU. So she's always been a phenomenal player, but I will say that like we have beat her before, but she's a phenomenal player. She beat us in OFSA. So that was the one chip. I was like, I wish I got that one. Yeah. So, and seeing her development, actually, I'll say that seeing her development and like how far she's gone and all the things she's doing in the WNBA and overseas and on TSN now, I'm like, I can't help but be so happy for a Canadian woman just absolutely shining. But yeah, so going back to USports now. So yeah, my career was injury riddled, to say the least. Honestly, like I could almost name you, like give me, like you name the year, I'll name the injury. Like, and these are all like, so I had 2 season ending ones. I had my first year, I blew my knee completely in like a Christmas training camp. That was like pretty devastating to me. And then my 3rd year university, I blew my knee again, but this time in like a Christmas scrimmage against another team. It's actually funny enough against the team that we played at nationals back in my 2nd year. And so the game was very highly competitive and just a bad fall, just a very bad fall. And like, I look back at the things like could I have prevented any of these? And like, no, like the way that everything happened, I was just like, yeah, there's no amount of strength training or thing like to prevent the way I fell. So yeah, so that was like really crushing to come to terms with. And then the years I was healthy, I was pretty much like regaining back my confidence on the court, regaining my coach's confidence in me on the court. Cause like my coach at the time I got to my 4th year, my coach Carly, she was just like, I don't want you to get hurt. I'm like, I don't want to get hurt. And so my 4th year, I was like, I'm just gonna have fun. I'm just gonna sit back and you like do your thing. I'll be a vocal leader. I could contribute to the team in any way possible, but honestly, I just want to be healthy. So, if that means me playing less, if that means me not being as effective on the court this year, then that's fine. Like, I'm just here for the team and to support the girls. Like I'm such amazing people. So that's kind of my U Sports experience. However, I will say that I loved it because, I still got to play some games, still played very well in some games. I loved preseason because we got to travel all over Canada. I literally could say I went coast to coast to Canada, BC, Newfoundland, went to the most like northeast point of like North America or something like that in Newfoundland. And then went to Victoria in BC. So absolutely beautiful country. I got to see it. I don't think I would have got to see Canada if I didn't play basketball, if I wasn't a part of U Sports. So yeah, very grateful.
So then would you say, because you talked about before having opportunities to go down to the US and within U Sports, playing for a team like Ryerson, you get a chance, as you mentioned, to go all across the country. Looking back, is there part of you that is curious about what an experience down in the US would have been like, or is it, let bygones be bygones?
So the beautiful thing is that I have a twin sister and I live vicariously through her. So I kind of feel like I know what the experience in the US would have been. And to be honest, my sister's experience in the US wasn't always positive at times. So I kind of feel like I actually got maybe a better experience in her playing in Canada than she did in US. And that's not to say that like all US players have that. No, not at all. I think it's just her personal experience. But she went to Alabama and she played there. She transferred to Northwestern, played there, had a pretty good career. And then ended up playing overseas in Australia. And now she's currently in Germany. So she's had quite the career herself. And through her, I was able to meet her teammates in the States. I actually got really close to her Northwestern teammates, actually. Like, they actually kind of became they adopted me, really. Like, between me, like over Skype with my sister talking to them, talking to her, they'd always steal her phone or steal her tablet and like talk to me. And so the time I went down to go visit my sister for like an entire summer one time, they were like, you're coming in practice with us. Like, you're coming into like this. And like, it was awesome because I really felt validated in the fact that like, wow, like I'm hanging with them. Like, I'm not like dying. I'm not like not contributing. Like, this is just a practice. And I feel like I'm totally like on that level. So like, it was definitely like, okay, so if I did play in the States, it would have been a fun experience too, but definitely a different one. And I'm happy that I have a twin sister to kind of like live out that option for me. So yeah.
Okay, this is a bit of a maybe an off course question, but so if you were to make a Netflix special about your career playing basketball, who would you choose to cast as the role of yourself and why?
Oh my goodness, what's that girl from Love and Basketball? She literally, I actually think she kind of looks like me too. Let me literally Google her right now. She's awesome, man. And I literally quote her too.
Oh, that's
Yo.
oh my goodness. Yeah, that's quite the basketball movie that sometimes doesn't get
Yes. Yeah. I think her name's Sana, Lathan. Yeah. So she's amazing. I would totally like have her play me because she killed it in Love and Basketball. So I mean,
that's quite the movie. I think that doesn't get as much, maybe of a big reputation as it should as a basketball movie. I know people always talk about Coach Carter and Glory Road, but yeah, that's a very interesting choice. I mean, like, is that like one of your favorite basketball movies?
it's a good movie. It's a great movie. I think, to be honest, it's a rom-com to me. Like, it's not really a basketball movie. I will say though that like I love the line when she's just like a little girl, like in the beginning, being like when the boy like oh, girls can't play no ball, and she's like, I could ball better than you, and I'm like, oh. And then she goes and schools him and everything. I'm like, yo, this is fine. Like, this is like okay. But as for basketball movies, Glory Road is actually my favorite.
I think that I've only seen that one once, and it was honestly super awesome. But I hate to be super basic, but I have to say Coach Carter.
Coach Carter. Oh my goodness.
I have to say that because just the first time I watched it, I was like, every line that he has in the movie is like a roast or a lesson, and I was just like, I can't. Like, it's so I'm so captivated by it. I'd honestly say it's even one of my favorite sports movies besides like Friday Night Lights.
Really?
The movie, not the show, but like, I mean, that's.
See, I actually saw the show, not the movie, and the show for Friday Night Lights is amazing. Amazing. Oh my goodness. One of my favorite shows, period. So like I was actually trying to like rewatch it the other day. So I was trying to find it. I couldn't find it. But I think my favorite sports movie of all time, Remember the Titans. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's
so good.
It's pretty iconic. And I mean, to be honest, I've actually only seen it once, like a long time ago, but there's just something about that era of like those like late 90s to mid 2000s movies that really slapped. And
yeah,
you mentioned Remember the Titans, like it is super iconic. And even like Friday Night Lights, sometimes I don't think gets enough love as a movie from sports fans or people in general, because people, will always say, oh, well, the show. And, I think when I talk to people that have played football, they'll say the movie. But then when I talk to like just a general population, guys and girls, which for some strange reason in my experience, I've come across, more girls that have talked about loving the show than guys. And they'll say, oh, Friday Night Lights, the show is so great. I'm like, is it because it's just like dramatic and just like high school stuff, or is it because of football? Like, I mean, and that's just me being like into the sporty element of
absolutely.
It is
See, that's me with Coach Carter. Like the way that you're talking, that's how I feel about Coach Carter. Like, is it just because it's like high school drama or like whatever drama and everything, and then they happen to play basketball, or is it because you like the basketball sport? Like, that's why I love Glory Road. I feel like it's a lot more basketball, and then they also bring the racial element into it too, which I appreciate.
Of course, and that's and I mean, even for I guess I think it is a Disney movie, right? Like, or it was made.
I think so. I think it is actually. Yeah, I gotta double check that, but I think so.
But yeah, like it's like, with everything that happens, like in Canada, the US, in that regard, like I think that, those movies have a lot of like simple but powerful messages.
Yeah.
In that subject matter, especially like in a movie like Friday Night Lights, where, that takes place in like Texas, and it's like, and the guys really create this strong bond. And like, I think Friday Night Lights, I mean, I haven't seen the show, so I can't speak off of like personal experience, but the movie takes a lot more of a serious approach. And you can tell with the ambiance that it's not like as bright colored, like it's kind of dark, and like the music is always just like really serious, and just you kind of get this like this creepy vibe at times. Not that it's like scary, but it just seems like too close to reality. But I don't know, like sports movies, like I haven't seen. I honestly think it's kind of hard to make like a really good one. Now we've
Mm,
listed several amazing ones, but for all the like really good movies that touch sports or that are dramatic, there's always like the silly ones, the ones that are over exaggerated. Like there's like the Air Buds, and I'm not taking anything
yeah.
away from, watching a dog break its leg and then catch a touchdown pass. But I think that,
The Blades of Glory.
yeah, exactly. Like, that's serious. It is. I personally find it's really hard to capture the true element of the sport in a serious and convincing fashion without it being too over dramatized. And that's why when I watched Coach Carter, I was like, oh, they didn't actually win in the end, but they learned life lessons that shows that sport teaches you something greater than any success you'll ever accumulate on the court, which is why the first time I watched it, I was so impacted by it. But I mean, obviously, each person has their own perspective, and yours is completely valid. And I would honestly agree that you can have that view on it, because there is a lot of the stuff in the movie that takes place off the court, but there's so many amazing quotes that I just absolutely love.
Yeah. It is hard. Actually, it's funny because when I was at Ryerson, I took a class. It was like a 2-part class too. It was like from ideation to screen, and I studied a little bit about sports movies, and they're one of the movies that you want to avoid, actually, because it's really expensive to make a sports movie. And the fact that like you're having actors play as athletes, essentially, first of all,
Mhm.
that alone is hard because like, actors, they're not necessarily athletes. So it's when you're acting in that certain light, then it's just that much more. You have to make sure that they're convincing, which I mean, that's why there's doubles, but then it's like a high budget movie because there's doubles, there's fans in the audience. Like if you ever watch a sports movie, just count how many times you have a wide shot of fans, not like a close shot, and not like a wide shot as in like so wide that you could see it's like CG. It's like wide enough that there's probably at least 100 to 200 extras in the crowd.
Mhm.
You might have very close shots of like, whoever the mom is, the daughter's cheering in the crowd. But like, that's because like, okay, well, they could fill like 5 or 6 people around them and makes it look like it's still a big crowd. But yeah, sports movies are not done that often because of the budget and the logistics behind it. I remember like I actually pitched a sports show in that class, and they're like, we love the idea and everything, but like they're like, yes, that would be very costly. I'm like, true.
That's interesting that you mention that, because I never stopped to think about that. And I know that the first movie that jumped into my mind when you talked about wide shots and everything was Rocky IV, the final fight
Mm.
scene in Russia. Like it takes place, obviously it's the set's super small, but the way that they, pan the crowd and make it look like there's just thousands and thousands of people there. In all honesty, like that movie in terms of its plot is so thin, but in terms of the spectacle and the budget that they had and all the music, the score and the montages, like, because as a kid I watched it, I was like, oh, this movie is so amazing, like I love this. But then when I watched it as I was older, I was like, oh, now I can see why Rocky 1 or 2 had won more awards or whatever, because it was more centered around the drama of the plot and his life and the
Mm-hmm.
closeness to what actually Sylvester Stallone's life was like in comparison to, just quote here, it's in Russia. You can't win. I got to. Blah, blah, blah. Montage. Boom. Like so epic,
Yeah.
but definitely very thin in terms of the actual material. And you're really right on that in terms of the way that sports movies can be difficult to captivate and be convincing, because all the people in Coach Carter or the Friday Night Lights or Remember the Titans, how many scenes do you have to have them throwing a ball or shooting or catching or whatever it is? Because that's the thing that you can't really like, you
It's
can't make
hard to
them
teach.
you can't just make him a superstar overnight. And like
Yeah.
Ryan Gosling being a liability and Remember the Titans. We'll always remember that. That's very funny. But
Yeah.
those are great points you bring up. I've never ever, I mean, hey, that's where a sports media education comes in handy when you're also an
Huh?
athlete.
It comes in, yeah, because if you ever like look at like a close shot of like, say they don't have the stunt double, say they actually have the actor playing like for one scene on the court or on the field, look at their technical, like would you actually suggest that form in a real game? Like probably not. Like that's why it's, I don't know, it's cringe a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah, that's it can definitely be like, I'm honestly like, I'm a huge soccer fan, or I guess like that was like the first sport I truly fell in love with. I wouldn't say I follow it as closely anymore, but I always found that like I never really enjoyed any soccer movie. And like the main
Yeah.
like the
Bend it
main
like
soccer
Beckham.
movie that comes to mind is like, oh, like Bend It Like Beckham, like that always comes to mind because of like
Yeah.
the plot and like, the a girl can play, etc. I think that was more memorable than like the actual play,
Yeah.
them playing itself. But like I remember as a kid, there was a movie that came out called Goal, and it was about this guy. I think he grew up in the US or Chile or somewhere, and he went to play for Madrid, and it was this big dramatized thing. And I was honestly like, this isn't that good. I don't know. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Like, have you ever seen a good soccer movie? Like,
I was literally just Googling like because I couldn't remember the name of it, but like, and this is not really, I hesitate to call this a soccer movie, but like She's the Man.
oh yeah, yeah, like exactly. Like, like that's
Like, it's not really a soccer movie. It's just about like a girl pretending to be a boy, and she's like, I think she happened to be on the soccer team, but like she's also like really good or whatever, right? So, anyways, yeah, like that. There's not a whole lot of soccer movies that I could say that I've really watched. You could have angry soccer fans in your comments and being like, "There's this movie," and we completely missed it. But yeah, I personally I haven't watched a whole lot of soccer movies per se. So, I mean, Bend It Like Beckham is the first one that comes to mind, but yeah, no. When I think about what's the other one? They were like one of the dads coaches a soccer team.
oh, kicking and screaming, kicking and screaming.
Kicking and screaming.
Yeah,
That is
yeah,
but all these movies are like kind of comedy. Like they're not
yeah.
necessarily like, and like except for Ben is more like serious, but like, yeah, like these movies are more comedy. You're right. So, and
I
sorry,
mean,
my
yeah.
dog's barking in the background if you hear that. She's
No
barking at
worries,
me.
no worries. I mean, even like, yeah, kicking and screaming, I totally forgot. Like, I love that movie as a kid just because it was just Will Ferrell being silly and the relationship with his dad and the kids and blah, blah, blah. And like Mike Ditka showing up. And honestly, like, football fans and old heads may get angry at me for this, but like, that was how I came to know who Mike Ditka was. Not because of following football, because I literally watched Kicking and Screaming. I was like, oh, Mike Ditka from Kicking and Screaming when he calls the Asian kid Bing Bong and all this stuff. And,
That's so bad now.
like,
Oh
yeah, like looking back, I was like, yo, like they actually like, the lesbian couple and like the Asian kid. I was like, yo, like this is low key like living on the razor's edge, but for
I don't.
2005, like it's
I was
like,
gonna say
oh,
I don't
whatever.
think they can get away with that now.
No way, no
Today they'd
way.
be canceled.
Like 100%. And like even just thinking about it right now as I'm talking to you, I was like, oh wow, like that's
That's
kind of
really
crazy that like they did that and everyone was just like, oh, whatever, like that's fine.
right.
And you just
Yeah.
laugh at it as a kid, but like now it's like, definitely haven't
Ooh.
seen something like that in a long time. Or if that couple was going to be in a movie, it definitely wouldn't be like, the butt end of just the joke of Mike Ditka just being the man's man, or just being that like, meathead type coach. Because
Yeah.
I mean, obviously that's the kind of reputation he had when he was in the NFL, coached the Bears and traded the entire house and the kitchen sink or the farm, whatever you want, for Ricky Williams. And look how that turned out for if you're a football fan, for the listener. But we're getting towards the end of our time. I want to ask one more wrap-up question. I've had tons of fun today. Oh my goodness, talking about sports, movies, and Raptors and everything. Okay, what is this is gonna be a good one. What is the one thing that you wish would happen in sports that doesn't, from the perspective of a fan's experience in professional sports? What's one thing you wish that they would do for fans in pro sports that they don't, but would be super cool if they did?
Good question. Because I also I'm trying to think, because it has changed so much just this past year being a pandemic year. So, I could have given you a completely different answer if it was like last year in February or something like that. But like now with the world being so virtual, I mean, I feel like they, like a lot of teams have tried to incorporate more experiences that way. I think
even outside of COVID, like if like it could be outside of COVID, or like when it recedes.
one thing that pro sports can do for fans. I feel like they do a lot though. That's a great question. I feel like they could I think they're always looking to engage fans and how they can continuously do so. So I think fans enjoy feeling more and more connected to the people who they look up to and everything. And I think we've seen it in some teams. Like I think there's like this new technology that I was made aware of, not through MLSE but through the States. One of my friends, he's in charge of it actually, that you could text one of your like idols, I guess, a celebrity. And so they actually have it with Shaq, and they have it with a few other NBA players. I think Damian Lillard is one of them actually. And you could actually send him a text message, and there's a chance that he would actually respond. But otherwise he himself will like send text messages, and it will go to, I guess, this like wider group of fans or whatever. Mm-hmm. And he could give you like more of like a insider message rather than just like saying it out to the media. So it's a bit more of a different relationship there rather than just tweeting something out. So I think that was really cool. I think that's going to expand in the future, whether it's via just text message or something else. I think there's going to be a better relationship, maybe a closer, maybe it feels just closer, like between professional athletes and the fans themselves. I would like to see that. I don't know what that looks like, but I think we're getting to a digital age where like social media is very interconnected, and it feels like there's almost nobody that's out of reach these days. So I think the gap between superstar athlete like a Michael Jordan and the fans at the time was like so far apart that like now it's like, well, we see LeBron on Instagram being like Taco Tuesday, and like now everybody's follow Taco Tuesday, and he's like reposting, and like, so like I think that fan engagement with professional teams and athletes in particular is only going to get closer. And so I think that's something that, pro sports can work better to do for the fans as well. That's a great question though. I'm going to think about that one.
I know that's definitely more of a, you're answering an innovative question, and then, that becomes the next big idea. But I like the answer. I honestly didn't know what to expect, but like definitely that you mentioned, even when watching Last Dance, like people would literally have sold their soul if they could have got tickets to his, the Michael Jordan farewell tour or potential farewell tour. People didn't even know at the time, but now with how much with how much more closely fans are connected to players, I think it definitely creates a more meaningful experience. Obviously, being it in a positive light, But yeah, that's with that. I want to thank you, Savanna, for having been on today's episode. It was so fun to talk about a whole array of topics, and it's just a pleasure as always to be able to sit down and chat with you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, man. You're awesome.
Appreciate the kind words, and to the listener, thank you for listening to today's episode with host and producer of the Toronto Raptors, Savanna Hamilton.